Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
This meeting is being recorded.
Metro TV, 30 seconds. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Works Committee. What? Yeah. This meeting's being held pursuant to KRS 61.826 and Council Rule 5A. Item number 2, I believe it is being held. It's either 1 or 2. So the only item on the agenda we have today is a presentation by Vision Zero. I am joined in chambers by Councilman Bratcher, Councilwoman Reno Weber, Councilwoman Bast, my Vice Chair Shamika Parrish-Wright, and Councilman Herndon. And online we have Councilman Syme. We are joined by Councilwoman Chappell, and we have as our guest today Executive Director, and I'm not sure your title, ma'am. It's Claire Yates.
So,
Executive Director Kern and Claire Yates. How's that?
Good afternoon. Claire is much too humble, and we'll get to that. She is our lead for our Vision Zero program, which is huge, with safety guiding everything that we do. So with that, I will turn it over to Claire.
The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Hi, Councilmember Syme. So thank you all for having us today for this annual update.
But before you get started, I'd like to ask this. Do you want questions as you go through your presentation, or would you rather wait for questions at the end?
I'm ambivalent, one or the other. How about just wait till the end?
Okay,
Is that okay?
all right, thank you.
Cheryl, do I hit down? It's not going. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. I can work a computer, I swear. So what is Vision Zero? Well, first of all, the stated goal is to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. But really, more broadly than that, it's a new way of thinking about traffic safety. Instead of using a 5-year rolling average to determine the level of acceptable number of fatal crashes in a community, more and more communities, not just in the U.S., but across the globe, have started to take the position that in fact no roadway fatalities are acceptable, and our only mission is to reduce those numbers as close to zero as possible. So here in Louisville, in 2022, Louisville Metro Council voted unanimously to pass an ordinance in support of Vision Zero. Different communities do it a little bit differently based on their own transportation needs. But here in Louisville, we set a vision of 0 roadway deaths by 2050. Like most U.S. cities, that excludes interstates, also you can call them freeways or expressways, different terminology for different folks, as well as crashes on parking lots, so which would be private property. And also the ordinance requires an annual report be published, made public, as well as, so that's what I'm here today to present to you all. So if 0 is our vision, then a safe system approach is how we intend to get there. A safe system approach is a nationally recognized transportation safety strategy. It's founded around 6 core principles that are on the outer edge of this wheel here, including that death and serious injuries are unacceptable. And then at its core, at its foundation, are 5 overlapping strategies that you'll see here listed on the side: safer roads, safer people, speeds, vehicles, and post-crash care. You can kind of think of them as layers of Swiss cheese, right? And so what you're trying to do is reduce risk of fatal or serious injury crashes throughout the transportation system. So that might mean both redesigning a road, or right-sizing it, or converting it to two-way, but then also adding more lighting, improving, tightening up intersections with bump outs, right? Different things to kind of drive down and strongly discourage those fatal and serious injury crashes from occurring. So a real quick recap of last year, calendar year 2024. We won $800,000 in federal Safe Streets and Roads for All SS4A funding for 2 Vision Zero Louisville staff. We won that in the fall, but unfortunately that grant funding is now dependent upon execution of a grant agreement by U.S. Department of Transportation. So I'm being told that is on hold indefinitely. We shall see. So kind of that's hence the asterisks there. We released Louisville's first high injury network to guide our safer roads strategy, and I'll get into that more in a sec. We also developed our first speed management plan to guide our safer speed strategy, right? So getting back to those safe system approach elements, if safer roads is one of the 5 components, then basically, in short, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to prioritize those roads? Well, the High Entry Network does that. We developed and published a framework for creating a Safe Routes to School program in Louisville. That's now online. If there's interest in checking that out, it's not just a PDF. It's actually a website as well. And we co-hosted Louisville's 3rd annual World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. We hold it every year in November, and it's a really impactful day. And this picture is of the Safe Routes to School project team conducting road safety assessments. We sweated it out in the summer to conduct road safety assessments in 10 school zones. So a snapshot of our fatalities and serious injuries, right? So this is not at the crash level. This is actually at the individual injury severity level. So because sometimes when you disaggregate the data, a fatal crash might actually end up being involving both someone killed and also someone seriously injured too. So then when you disaggregate that, you actually get 2 incidents instead of 1. You can see here by travel mode, 55% of our fatalities and suspected serious injuries are by motor vehicle, but pedestrian crashes only make up 2% of all crashes, but accounted for 23% of fatals and serious injuries. So you can start to see where that really kind of disproportionality is occurring, right? It's among pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists because they don't have that same level of protection as someone in a vehicle. Here, this slide and the next will show some kind of national safety performance measures. These are a bit standardized across the country. I did break this out between surface streets and expressways / freeways / interstates. I call it that because sometimes people call it different things and think one doesn't encapsulate the other. But anyhow, key takeaway is that our fatalities on surface streets have gone down quite a bit over 2023. However, our pedestrian fatalities have actually have increased increased year over year quite a bit. While the number of 94 deaths is the lowest since 2020, that's actually still a little bit stubbornly too high from our pre-COVID numbers. And then on our serious injuries, we see, it stays roughly steady. The issue there is the number of suspected serious injuries is from a law enforcement officer actually reporting it, cataloging it right then and there. And so sometimes, the level and extent of that individual injury severity can change a little bit, right? You might classify something as a suspected serious injury versus a possible minor injury. But nevertheless, they've stayed roughly steady. As I mentioned, the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries have gone up every single year since COVID. At first, 2021, we were thinking, COVID will be an anomaly. We see this spike, and it'll come back down. But it really hasn't. I mean, particularly for non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, which actually mirrors a national trend. In 2023, the U.S. hit a 40-year high in pedestrian deaths across the country. And so then... And that also, too, is broken out between surface streets and expressways, even though technically or legally, pedestrians and cyclists are prohibited on interstates. Nevertheless, sometimes you get sometimes it does happen, and at that speed, it's particularly deadly. The fatality and serious injury rates are the remaining two of the 5 kind of national safety performance measures, and those have a lag to them because our vehicle miles traveled, or VMT data, is on a lag. So the most recent numbers are for 2023 there. So you can see there too. The fatality rate is staying steady, but as you see, it'll drop a little bit next year, given VMT data. So as I mentioned, the Safer Roads is one of the 5 safe system approach strategies. And so again, what are you going to do about it? Well, we developed Louisville's first high injury network. It's a data-driven approach to identify kind of pound for pound or mile for mile basis, sort of the worst of the worst. We're looking at surface streets that account for a disproportionate amount of fatal and serious injury crashes in our community, right? Where are they? Not just Dixie Highway, but where specifically on Dixie Highway? What stretch? Same with Broadway, Cane Run Road, Taylor Boulevard, New Cut Road, Poplar Level Road, right? The list goes on. So we identified just 5% of non-interstate miles, but 55% of non-interstate fatal and suspected serious injury crashes, right? So we're prioritizing what we think is a relatively manageable number of roads to kind of get our arms around these top priorities for us. And critically, 85% of Louisville's high injury network miles are owned by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and so their buy-in, their participation, their support, right, their lead on safety projects is critical to the success of Vision Zero Louisville, and they have been in many ways an excellent partner, and in fact, they funded the development of this high injury network as well as our speed management plan as well. Our speed management plan is the foundational document or foundational resource for our safer for our safer speeds strategy. So that speed management plan has been under development for a little bit over a year, and we expect a draft to be released this spring. And some of the key recommendations will include creating a speed management plan and actually dedicating someone full-time to speed management to oversee the implementation of this plan, right, and kind of be a subject matter expert on speeds, because we know from this graph here from NHTSA that kinetic energy is what kills. You can see here that a pedestrian speeds increase, a pedestrian's chance of survival decreases dramatically, right? It's simple physics that you can't escape. A couple of other recommendations worth pointing out would be to use road context classifications to set appropriate speed limits. So rather than just look at what speeds people are already driving, actually look at a bit more holistic context, so land use, population density, level of pedestrian activity, right? Some of those sorts of things that right now, crash data, right now that historically we have not done, we're trying to move in that direction. As well as, this might seem straightforward, but nevertheless still very impactful to adopt a consistent speed limit sign placement and spacing policy, right? So where are our speed limit signs? Are they accurate? How retroreflective are they, right? Are they too worn out to be visible, particularly at night? Are they too few and far between, right? So it's pretty admit, a bit basic stuff, but you need, resources will need to be dedicated to ensure that success. I also included in the annual report some performance measures that were recommended as part of the Vision Zero Louisville Safety Report that was published in 2021. That is a precursor to our forthcoming Vision Zero Louisville Action Plan, which will outline some updated goals and objectives for the program in the years ahead. But nevertheless, I think it's important that to include those safety report performance measures. We met 3 in 2024 compared to 6 in 2023 and 1 in 2022. Because the safety report is getting a little bit stale and we'll be shifting over to the action plan, which is a little bit more of a modern approach. We didn't place quite as much emphasis on some of the intersections listed in the safety report and focused a bit more on broader initiatives like our high injury network. But nevertheless, here's a couple pictures of some signal removals to all-way stops. We did quite a few of those in calendar year 2024. Here's one at 6th and Ormsby. Lighting. Roadway lighting is a cross-cutting safety performance measure or safety countermeasure. Whether it be from crash or crime, roadway lighting is just a good idea. Here's lighting that here's a picture of lighting installed on New Cut Road at West Kenwood Drive. In 2022, Public Works initiated a study of using crash and crime data to analyze the top 20 intersections in the Urban Services District that needed additional lighting, and this was one of them. So thanks to a little bit of a small pot of money from Districts 15 and 21, we were able to install new roadway lighting at 5 intersections up and down the Taylor-New Cut corridor last year. So as I mentioned, on our outreach and engagement front, we co-hosted Louisville's 3rd annual World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims. This year we had over 30 attendees, and again we had the mayor speak in support, as well as Councilmember Dan Syme Jr. Thank you again for speaking at the event. And you can see what as well as particularly and most importantly, folks who have lost loved ones to crashes. And you can see here Brandy Stafford Wright, Janet Heston, and Teresa Martinez, all 3 really strong ladies who have unfortunately lost loved ones in roadway crashes and are here to do everything that they can to prevent others from experiencing that same pain. We also host a monthly task force call. That task force is open to the public. It's a wide range of topics and a range of audience members as well. It's everyone. It's transportation planners, engineers. It's emergency services folks. It's even a pediatric trauma surgeon. It's injury prevention folks. It's advocacy groups. It's kind of a melting pot. Anyone who's interested in transportation safety will typically hop on. Published 11 monthly e-newsletters and not quite doubling the subscriber number as well, and tabled at a few events and delivered a few presentations as well. So my final slide is our goals for 2025. A couple of them are carried forward from 2024. Top one there, complete the speed management plan. As I mentioned, a draft should be expected actually pretty shortly. I was hoping by the end of the calendar year, but you know how it goes. I'm really pleased with that effort, and I think it'll be a really strong foundation for us. Also, as I mentioned, 2 positions that were to be funded by a federal Safe Streets and Roads for All grant are on pause. One of them would have been a transportation planner housed in Public Works / the future DOT to oversee implementation of the speed management plan and really act as that sort of safer speeds person or coordinator. As well as we've partnered with Public Health for close to maybe over 2 years to try to get an epidemiologist in public health to kickstart a post-crash care program. They would liaison with EMS, with U of L Trauma Institute, with Norton Children's for some of the PED work, injury prevention work that they do. They would also perform data linkage across collision reports, EMS run sheets, and trauma registry data, improve that data accuracy, all of those sorts of things would be in their wheelhouse. We fully intend to host a 4th annual World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims this November. A goal at the local level is to secure Metro funding for Louisville's first Safe Routes to School program, as well as allocate 1 full-time staff critically to manage that program. Those are basically 2 pieces on the same coin there. You have to have both the funding and the staff to implement it, as well as carrying forward to, as I mentioned earlier, to expand the existing safety report into a little bit more broader, holistic action plan to formalize goals and objectives for the coming years. And that's the end of my slide deck.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I've got a couple questions, and then I'll have a few people in the queue that we'll hand it over to. My first question is, can you give me some idea of the size of your organization, how many people you have in Vision Zero?
Sure. So it's the city, Vision Zero Louisville is the city's transportation safety initiative. So while I currently am the only full-time dedicated staff to Vision Zero Louisville, and as I mentioned, possibly double that with a couple other folks as well, potentially. But it's really more about interweaving and prioritizing roadway safety into everything that we do. That's really the long-term vision. And we're able to partner with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet on that effort as well, to again put public safety first and not do anything that does not improve public safety.
And the only thing I'll add is that some of that, and having that program and having Claire's expertise with us, for instance, our paving funding that we were given this fiscal year, a portion of that was intended to go towards some Vision Zero projects. So Claire was able to hand over, if we say, hey, we have funding, what's the most urgent from a safety aspect? She can say, here are the top projects, and then we hand that over to our team to do some design and get those built. So as far as the role now is setting that and imprinting that value on everything that we do.
Let me see if I understand what you just said. The funding that was intended for paving is being
Striping.
used to fund Vision Zero.
So we received $3.8 million in striping last year, which is substantially more than we typically receive. And in going back and discussing the scope of that, there was a portion of that that was intended to provide for, because many of the projects that in proven safety countermeasures are not high-cost things. They can be done through the course of restriping or paint and post or quick build type projects. So a portion of that restriping was allocated to go and to do Vision Zero projects to identify, I can't remember, it was the top 5 locations, but we can get that information.
Let's just rip this Band-Aid off here real quick. Is striping money being used to pay for World Day of Remembrance?
No.
Okay.
It is specifically for consulting, and then it would be for bidding for those projects. So it would be fully for implementation of projects, not for any other program items within Vision
Okay.
Zero. And I apologize for that. What I mean is that Clear is helping us set, when I go to her and I say, hey, we're going to build something, we've been asked to build, example type projects for Vision Zero, what are the highest priority? We already have all of that data. So when we go to look at projects, we understand, hey, we're working in this area. Is there something else we can do? We understand what the priorities are as far as what we need to be addressing first.
Yeah. So I'm all for making safer roads, and I don't think I would get any pushback from any member of Metro Council that we need to find a way to mitigate speed. We have examples in Councilman Symes' district of and you can back me up on this, Dan, if you want. There's a street in Fairdale where the speed limit is 25, but cars are routinely going 95. I have a street in my district where 2 kids have gotten hit just trying to cross the street to get to school. Councilwoman Bast has an intersection in her district where all 4 houses at that intersection have been hit by cars multiple times, and there have been 4 fatalities. It didn't show up on the map that you had up on the screen earlier. I think there's maybe a disconnect between what the data that you're seeing and what we're getting phone calls about. There needs to be some way to connect all that. But I don't think I got a good answer to my first question of how many people are we paying for in Vision Zero.
So Clear is the only team lead.
Okay. And the 2 to be added by the federal grant that is on hold, that's $800,000 for 2 people. That seems excessive. Or is that over multiple years? Okay.
Over
So
5
my
years.
question is, when that money runs out, do those people understand that their job ends? Or are you expecting Metro to pick up the salaries for those 2 people going forward?
So that grant is actually it has been flagged, it is on hold with the federal government. So we are holding out hope, but don't know if that will move forward. As far as grant-funded positions, we are not allowed to post them without notifying applicants that they are grant-funded and that there's an end to those positions.
So the intent is, when the grant runs out, those jobs disappear.
With that funding, correct.
Yep.
Well, and
That,
we would.
that didn't give me a
if-
warm fuzzy.
Well, we would have to go and we would have to ask for more positions and prove that there really was a need if we were going to come to Metro Council or within a budget request to ask for additional staff for that specific purpose.
Yeah. I'll get back in the queue here. Councilwoman Chapel.
Hello, Ms. Yates and Dr. Kern. Thank you for being here today.
Okay.
Just a few questions for you. First off, safe routes to school. Is there anything being done to support this? I know that we have the website and that information, but is there anything to support the initiatives that were outlined in that? For example, I have multiple schools in my district, elementary schools that would benefit from things like a crosswalk, a stop sign, things that we've identified in that report, but also things that we know. And so how is that report being supported? Not just by Vision Zero, but also by the Department of Transportation. And is there any money in the present budget or in the future budget to support those initiatives?
So we have asked for funding in next year's budget for Safe Routes to School to fund it in a dedicated way. With or without that funding, just a few of the things that our department does is meet with JCPS, meet with LMPD crossing guards, and we have multiple touch points with JCPS to further efforts together.
I'll go to this one. I have just a couple. Council-directed traffic calming program. That's something that we're all working through, and we've all identified areas, and hopefully these council members have identified those terrible areas that they mentioned. We're in the process of identifying those and then seeing which ones can move forward with the funding that was allotted. I'm just wondering whether this can be answered now or later, but in the scope of the Department of Transportation or Public Works, it seems like Public Works now has two arms, the Department of Transportation and Solid Waste Management. And underneath of the Department of Transportation arm, you have various things which include Vision Zero, complete streets, engineering, road maintenance. And I'm just wondering, where does the council-directed traffic calming program fall into all of that? Because I can completely see where some of these questions may seem like they're dodgy to answer, but instead it's just complicated to answer because everyone kind of has, hopefully, a hand in that project, but hopefully all of those hands aren't prohibiting anything from moving forward, if that makes sense.
On the council-directed traffic calming, yes, that is being led by our planning team, and we have a Complete Streets, Jeremy Schessler is our Complete Streets lead, and he is leading that program. With that being said, when we look at improvements to the point, and this is where Vision Zero would come into play, we do shop those improvements with the other people in our office because we all have different specialties, different areas of expertise. And right before the holiday, we all got together in a room with engineers and planners and walk through a lot of those to do a first visit and say, hey, what can we do here? What are the options? And I think that is one of the many beauties about creating the Department of Transportation is removing those silos. And, we have a program, but understanding we are very lucky to have so much diversity and expertise within our office.
Sure, and so those council-directed funds, when they're looking at those projects that all of our council districts have submitted to be qualifiers for the program, is Claire at that table saying this matches up with the data that I have in Vision Zero and using that to kind of, in a way, grade or rank the projects that we should be prioritizing?
Yes, so there is scoring that is provided within that, and data like that is included as one of the criteria for scoring.
Great. Traffic school, many, many moons ago, I remember that the person that was the instructor said that she had gotten out of a traffic ticket once because she went back and measured the distance between speed limit signs, and they're supposed to, I believe, every 8 miles there should be a sign that says this is how fast you should be going, and there was a sign missing, and so she got her ticket dismissed. And I thought, well, wow, isn't that neat? And it kind of started this fascination with, good, there's regulations behind where these signs should be placed, how high they should be placed, how regular they should be placed. But in your presentation, it said that Louisville needs to adopt a consistent speed limit sign placement and spacing policy. So can you just clarify, that doesn't exist?
So there's standard guidance, to your point, but
That would come from like the MUTCD?
yes, and maybe it isn't as specific because we have a lot of differing areas. So let's say on a suburban collector, what does that look like? What are we typically going to do? If you're in a more urban area, maybe it looks different from that. So taking what guidance is available and making it more specific for this community in a way that can be more effective.
It's wild. The signs are so willy-nilly around here, and that kind of explains it. And last question, and if I have any more, I'll get in the queue. There's a discrepancy between police reports and reported crash data. Especially around 2020, people were told, don't call the police if you get into a fender bender, deal with it yourself. So I asked this last year about how and where our data is being collected in terms of crashes. Obviously, we can have pretty solid information when it comes to fatalities and serious injury. But how are we collecting that data and knowing that it's at least somewhat accurate to what's actually happening on the streets?
Sure. So you're right. It's fairly, let's say, easy to have a high confidence level in the fatal crash statistics or in that data. Those can be verified not just through collision reports, but usually things like death certificates as well. On the suspected serious injury level, that's where data linkage really comes into play, right? So, an officer is making a judgment call in that moment with limited information, right? May have a limited view of the victim. May not be able to see a certain crush injury or internal bleeding, things like that. And so they're making that judgment call for that individual injury severity. But what some national research shows is that you can improve the accuracy of that data by actually linking together collision reports with EMS run sheets and the trauma registry data to get a much fuller public health view of what's happening, how did it happen, how quickly did the ambulance arrive on scene, how long did it take to get to the hospital. Now we'll have pre-hospital blood, which is phenomenal because most folks for car crashes actually die from blood loss. So that's really exciting, and as well as did that suspected serious injury classification, did that hold true? Were there some that were classified as a minor injury that actually should be upgraded to a suspected serious injury? And then, because we use that data to help inform future roadway safety projects.
And I'm just curious, I know I said that was my last question, but when it comes to running into someone's house, if that happened on private property and not on a public roadway, is that still a crash record that you would be pulling?
It depends. But typically, yes, because the vehicle was at speed or on that road and then veered off. It depends, but so the entire point of Vision Zero is to prioritize fatal and serious injury crashes. We know we're not going to eliminate all crashes. We know that we're not going to eliminate all fender benders. That's not realistic. Our focus is on the worst of the worst, those fatal and serious injury. Serious injury, or you could think of them too as life-altering. So loss of limb, prolonged coma, brain bleed, third-degree burns, things like that. The really sort of life-altering injuries, debilitating or disabling injuries. Those are the types of crashes that we're trying to either prevent or mitigate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Bratcher.
I know I appreciate analysis and whatnot, but why can't you just go to that map and wherever it's blue, just reduce the speed limit? Is that a possibility? Like the map here on page, just the map with the blue lines.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, sure. The high injury network.
So some of those are state-owned roads, so that would be a discussion that we would want to have. And then also, just as far as changing, you mentioned like sign placement, we'd want to have a plan to go through. So there are some places that, I guess depending upon the context, figuring out what the speed limit should be, because you may have a road that looks very similar or operates a little different. But definitely as part of the speed management plan, that's something that we would be looking at exactly, is saying this is obviously, most crashes are the result of speeding. So looking at that as one of the options, because there's no one silver bullet. It's going to be multiple things to address
Give me
really
some
the
others.
problem. What's
Like
that?
if you say you have if you're blue on this map, why would you be blue on you see what I'm talking about, the blue map? The map
Sure.
with the blue line? Like Dixie Highway, and the entire thing is blue.
Sure. Yeah, so
I mean,
that's
what's causing that?
kind of a multitude of factors. For one, one of the systemic risk factors is number of lanes and and speed limit as well, right? So, a big part of Dixie Highway is 7 lanes total, kind of cross section, and particularly at speed. It's really, particularly when you involve pedestrians, and Councilmember Bass could probably speak to some of this as well, right? So when you intermix high vehicle speeds, multiple lanes, and pedestrians, particularly outside of daylight time, either at dawn, dusk, or in the dark, that's where you typically see quite a bit of the injury severity. And so as we go along here, so Broadway, right, quite a few pedestrian crashes. On the Greenbelt, the speed alone will kill you, right? I mean, so there's definitely kind of
Seems
multiple
like that.
pieces.
I don't mean to be obtuse, but it just seems like lower the speed and the accidents are going to drop, right? I mean, I know that nobody wants to do that. But
Right. So the most convincing way to lower the speed is if if the roadways are designed or enhanced in a way that encourage you to drive a lower speed, without having enforcement for those lowered speed limits, there's no real way to make sure that that's happening. But that is a tool. Lowering the speed limit is a tool in the toolbox that we are looking at.
And then one last thing, if I might, Mr. Chair. So, there's an area in my district that's it was like a 3-way intersection, and it was local, it was Metro, and you guys this was about 5 years ago. You put stop signs at each of the 3 lanes, and people complained a lot about it. But it actually, in the long run, it started making things better. There was a lot less accidents there, and then. So the guys down the street at Johnson School and Beulah Church, they want one there, and you guys tell me that you can't do that. I mean, so just briefly, what goes into the analysis of that? Is it just study of accidents, or is it the study of how much volume of cars go through there, or what determines who gets a stop sign and who doesn't?
It depends on the context of it and the location. I can go back and take another look at that specific location, but it would depend upon the volume. One of the things that is discouraged is if you put a stop sign in, but there's not a volume, like if you roll up to a stop sign every single day and there's never a car coming from the other direction, at some point you might disregard that stop sign altogether. So there's concern that would be something that would happen if we were to place a stop sign in a place that it wasn't warranted. But we can certainly take another look. If it has been several years ago, to reevaluate volumes, because as we know, people are, some parts of the county are increasing in number of trips.
Well, as that Bardstown Road clogs up more and more every day, they're going back those back roads, and it's just it's crazy. But thank you. I appreciate your answers.
Councilwoman Parrish-Wright.
Thank you for your presentation. I tried to condense some of my questions, and thank you, Mr. Chair. My colleagues have touched on some of the questions I have, but one is around how closely are you working with KYTC, and do the work on the state roads like Dixie, Cane Run, and 7th Street interact with this? Because I think it would be helpful for us, and maybe my other council members have dived into it, but have some of this broken up by districts, because a lot of times we're explaining this to our constituents and what's a state-owned road and some of us who've had smaller cities in our district. So just what that relationship is like. And then I just have another question.
Sure. So to answer that one, we work hand in glove with KYTC daily, specifically on those roads that you mentioned. 7th Street Road, we partnered with KYTC to initiate a safety study because that is on the high injury network. We know that there are routinely fatal and serious injury crashes on 7th Street Road, which is Kentucky 1931. We know that, and so we're partnering with KYTC to do something about it. Same with Cane Run Road / Greenbelt Highway. We took the entire Kentucky 1934 corridor. That's an 11.5-mile stretch from Algonquin to the Snyder. And we broke that up into 3 sections, but looking at all of it to look at how can we improve safety on that road.
And this actually just came, I literally was at the state today at District 5, and that an example of that came up where Metro had prepared a study for Bardstown Road, and when the state went to do some changes, repave, they said, hey, why don't we look at this study that Metro's already done? So those things are happening more and more.
Okay. And thank you for being forthcoming with this, but also any updates that relate to our district would be helpful as we're trying to explain some of this. Our office gets a lot of complaints. Several of us share Dixie Highway, AKA Dixie Dyway, and we see the constant changes, but trying to break it down it's just helpful to have more concrete information. What are the priorities? How do they overlay with what's already been set out? And does your information sync with the insurance companies? Because that's another thing that we get complaints about is as premiums rise based on crashes and where people live, specifically near Dixie 7th, are they reading what, I know you might not know how they set those premiums, but is there information sharing with those folks to understand those numbers matching? So, because people feel like the rates keep changing, but it's really not explained. And if you don't have anything with that, it's fine too.
I don't know specifically on the high injury network. It seems to span the entire county. There is intensity in the center of the city and towards the west side of the city where we have a lot of one-way streets that are very wide. So the streets themselves would have characteristics you would anticipate could be dangerous.
And we have to move on to my colleague, but the last part of that was related to, are you directly working with one-way, all the conversions from one-way to two-way? Does this connect with that? And is that being, like what's happening at U of L? Like when they finish that project by Speed Museum, it's going to be some changes. Is your work connected to that? And that's it.
So we are actively working on a lot of roads to convert them. There's actually a meeting this evening to talk about what a comprehensive project would look like to change most of our roads to two-way and what that would need to be. But we actively have two-way conversions at different parts of the city. We actually just got bids back for Muhammad Ali and Chestnut two-way conversion. That's a project that we're not ready to make an announcement yet because we can't award it, but that should start in May. So after Derby, that'll be a project that we start. We're also working on our multiple SS4A right-sizing corridors, and that would include, to your point about the project near U of L, just north of that 2nd and 3rd Street between Cardinal and Broadway would be a continuation. And again, U of L and KYTC working on that project south, and then Metro working on the project to the north. So again, that partnership there.
Thank you. Councilman Syme, got a few minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Yates, Ms. Kern. One of the things I'm concerned about, we've done speed studies in my district, and we have found them doing, like Councilman Hudson alluded to, 95 and a 25. On my street, it's a 35 zone, but we've clocked them doing 90 mile an hour, and that was just in a 2-week study. Because it's a 35 mile an hour zone, I can't have a speed hump because they have to be 25. And the process just to get to that, I mean, we've got the data that says they're doing 95, they're doing 87, and it absolutely has to warrant speed humps, but the process has got to be streamlined. And I hope you guys will look at that a little better. A question, one of the things, speed, would you say that's the biggest percentage of fatal accidents and serious accidents?
Yeah, speed-related crashes are a significant factor or percentage of the overall number of crashes, but you could also get into things like maybe drunk impaired driving, and then whether or not there was also speeding involved. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to parse out. But yes, speeding, as a general rule, speeding increases the frequency and severity of crashes. Yeah.
Well, and
Just
what I'm
physics.
getting at is we clocked them doing the 97, the 95, and I asked the officer, what do we do in this case? And they said, well, we'll have more patrol. Well, we know that they're not going to have more patrol because we don't have enough police to chase the shooters. And so I've really been looking into automated enforcement. I believe that video evidence is starting to help us deal with the street takeovers. It deals with trash, people that are dumping. And I am looking more into automated enforcement. It would help the police officers. And I need to know where you all are at on that issue and if you are trying to push that in any way.
So that was something.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to
Okay.
probably call this to an end. We've got several people in the queue. We've got the end of our time. So there's a lot of interest in this work.
Excuse me, Councilman
Yes,
Hudson.
yes.
Ms. Kern can finish answering that question for Councilman Syme.
Thank you for your grace.
Thank you.
Go ahead and answer the question. I've been given a few more minutes.
Okay. To your first question on speed humps, I recognize that if a speed hump is requested and you don't meet the criteria, you've acknowledged, and we've done a speed study that acknowledges that there's an issue, and that there should be something in a process where this didn't qualify, maybe it qualifies for something else. That is something that we would like to set up and be able to just have more flexibility in the types of traffic calming that we're able to offer. And those are some things that we hope ring through in the council-directed traffic calming projects that we're able to lay out, is really showcasing other methods that aren't speed humps that could be a solution. To your point about automated enforcement, we are not actively petitioning for automated enforcement. I know, and we have gone to Frankfurt and spoken about it and about the benefit. We have been meeting. I know the Jefferson County Attorney was at our last Vision Zero Day of Remembrance as far as updates around things that are happening there.
Yeah, I saw a state bill, House Bill 664, with Blanton and Rourke as one of the co-sponsors. I saw it passed out of the House, which is phenomenal. I don't know what the latest is. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair. Thanks for the extra time. But I would hope that you'd look a little further into that because it's going to save lives. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Without objection, we stand adjourned.